The crash site smoldered in the pre-dawn darkness. Twisted metal and alien alloys scattered across the rocky hillside like the bones of some great beast. Jake Morrison crouched beside the wreckage, his medical scanner painting eerie blue shadows across his weathered face. 23 years as a colony medic had shown him plenty of tragedy, but nothing quite like this. The ship was unmistakably Valen, sleek, predatory lines now broken and bleeding strange fluids into the soil. These weren't explorers or traders. The weapon ports and reinforced hull told a different story. This was a warrior's vessel, and somewhere in that twisted metal was its pilot. Jake found her pinned beneath a collapsed bulkhead, her massive frame. Crumpled, but still breathing. Even unconscious and broken, she radiated the lethal grace that made Valan warriors legendary across the galaxy. Her skin held the distinctive blue-gray hue of her species, marked with intricate tattoos that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. 3 deep gashes ran across her torso, dark blood seeping steadily from wounds that should have killed her hours ago. Her eyes snapped open as Jake approached, silver orbs that held the cold light of distant stars. She spoke in heavily accented standard, her voice a low growl despite her injuries. "Human, you should not be here. Lady, you're dying," Jake said, already unpacking his emergency kit. "Let me help." "No." The word came out like a blade. "I am Kira of the Storm Clan. I die with honor, not in the dirt tended by soft-skinned farmers." Jake ignored her protests, running his scanner over her injuries. The readings made his stomach clench. Massive internal bleeding, 3 broken ribs puncturing lung tissue, and worst of all, some kind of toxin in her bloodstream that his scanner couldn't identify. She had maybe an hour, probably less. "Your honor can wait," he said, preparing a coagulant injection. "Right now you need medical attention." Kira tried to push him away, but her strength was fading fast. "You do not understand, human. A warrior dies in battle or dies in shame. There is no third path." "There's always a third path." Jake's hands moved with practiced efficiency, starting an IV line despite her weakening resistance. "And I'll be damned if I let anyone die on my watch, warrior or not." Something in his tone made her pause. She studied his face with those unsettling silver eyes, perhaps seeing the determination that had carried him through 2 decades of saving lives on the frontier. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk yourself for one who is already dead?" Jake met her gaze steadily. "Because that's what humans do. We don't give up, even when everything says we should. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. Galactic Nova Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you." As the stabilizing drugs took effect, Kira's protests grew weaker. Jake worked through the night, using every trick he'd learned in his years on the frontier. When conventional treatments failed, he improvised. When his equipment couldn't handle her alien physiology, he adapted. The toxin was the worst part, a biological weapon designed specifically to kill Valan warriors. His scanner showed it breaking down her cellular structure from the inside, turning her own blood into poison. No human antidote would work, but Jake had spent years studying xenobiology. He knew that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most elegant. He mixed a cocktail of human antibiotics with local plant extracts, compounds that shouldn't have any effect on Valan biochemistry. But Jake had noticed something in the toxin's molecular structure, a vulnerability that human medicines might exploit, not through direct action, but by creating an environment where her own immune system could fight back. It was a desperate gamble, the kind of improvisation that could save her life or kill her faster. But as Jake prepared the injection, he thought about all the lives he'd lost over the years, all the times when conventional wisdom said there was nothing more to be done. "Not today," he muttered, sliding the needle into her IV port. "Not on my watch." Kira's eyes fluttered open one more time as the experimental treatment entered her bloodstream. "Human," she whispered. "What is your name?" "Jake. Jake Morrison." "Jake Morrison," she repeated as if testing the sound. "If I live through this night, I will owe you a debt that spans the stars. Just focus on breathing. Jake said softly. "Let me worry about the rest." Outside, the colony's twin suns began to rise, painting the crashed ship in shades of gold and crimson. Jake kept his vigil, monitoring her vital signs as they fluctuated between hope and despair. Every few minutes, he adjusted her treatment, following instincts honed by years of frontier medicine. The toxin fought back, but slowly. So slowly he almost missed it. Her body began to respond. The cellular breakdown slowed, then stopped. Her breathing deepened. The terrible pallor began to fade from her skin. As the morning light filled the medical bay where he'd moved her, Jake allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. Kira was still unconscious, still critically injured, but she was alive. Against all odds, all logic, all conventional wisdom, she was alive. And that, Jake thought as he settled in for another long vigil, was what being human was all about. Kira drifted in and out of consciousness for 3 days, her warrior's constitution battling the exotic cocktail of human medicines flowing through her veins. Each time she woke, Jake was there, checking her readings, adjusting her treatment, or simply sitting quietly nearby. His presence both annoyed and confused her. "Why do you persist?" she asked during one of her lucid moments, watching him prepare another injection. "Your primitive medicines cannot heal what was meant to kill," Jake smiled, an expression that seemed entirely too cheerful for someone who hadn't slept properly in 72 hours. "Primitive? Lady? I've got you breathing, don't I?" She wanted to argue, but the evidence was hard to dispute. By all rights, she should have been dead before the first sunrise. Instead, her body was slowly knitting itself back together under his unorthodox care. The deep gashes across her torso had stopped bleeding entirely, sealed with some kind of synthetic skin that felt strange but effective. "Your medical technology is crude," she said, trying to maintain some dignity while hooked up to machines that looked like they'd been assembled from spare parts. "No surgical nanites, no cellular regeneration matrices. How do you even function as a species?" "Stubbornness, mostly." Jake checked her IV line with practiced ease. Plus a healthy disrespect for impossible odds. That afternoon, he brought her food, not the nutrient paste she expected, but actual prepared meals from his own kitchen. The flavors were strange but not unpleasant, and she found herself eating with an appetite she hadn't felt since before the battle that had nearly killed her. "Tell me about your world," she said, surprising herself with the request. "This colony. It seems peaceful." Jake settled into the chair beside her bed, fatigue finally showing in the lines around his eyes. "Haven is about as far from the core worlds as you can get and still call it civilization. 5,000 colonists, mostly families looking for a fresh start. We farm, we mine, we try to stay out of the galaxy's way. Yet you have advanced medical facilities." "Advanced?" Jake laughed. "Kira, this equipment is 20 years old and held together with determination and recycled parts. The nearest real hospital is 6 months away by freighter." She studied the machines, keeping her alive with new eyes. What she had dismissed as primitive suddenly seemed more impressive. These humans had taken outdated technology and somehow made it work beyond its designed parameters. More than that, they had improvised solutions to problems their equipment was never meant to handle. "The toxin," she said slowly. "How did you know what would counteract it?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't. Still don't, not really. I just noticed that it was breaking down your cellular walls in a specific pattern, and I remembered reading about a similar mechanism in a Terran parasite. So I treated you for a disease you don't have, using medicines that shouldn't work, and hoped your body would figure out the rest. That is," Kira searched for the right word, "insane." "Yeah, pretty much." Jake grinned. "But you're alive, so I'm calling it a win." Over the following days, as her strength returned, Kira began to observe her human savior more carefully. Jake moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years spent working alone in crisis situations. His hands were steady, his decisions quick, but thoughtful. When the colony's communication array malfunctioned, he fixed it with spare parts from 3 different machines. When a child was brought in with a broken arm, he treated the injury with the same focused intensity he'd shown her. "You are not like other humans I have encountered," she said one evening as he changed her bandages. "How many humans have you?" "Encountered? Enough." Her voice carried darker memories. They were weak, soft. They surrendered when faced with superior force. Jake's hands stilled for a moment. "What kind of humans?" "Traders, mostly. Some explorers. They spoke of peace and cooperation, but when pressed, they always yielded." She watched his face carefully. "You do not yield." "No," Jake said quietly. "I don't suppose I do." He resumed working on her bandages, his touch gentle but sure. "Maybe those humans you met had something to live for that was worth more than their pride. Family, maybe. Or maybe they were just scared." "You are not scared." Jake met her silver gaze. "Terrified, actually. Every day. But fear's just another problem to solve, isn't it?" That night, Kira lay awake thinking about his words. Fear is a problem to solve rather than a weakness to overcome. It was a distinctly human perspective. Her people viewed fear as an enemy to conquer through strength and discipline. But Jake seemed to acknowledge its presence while refusing to let it control his actions. She thought about the Battle of Kepler Station, where she had earned her scars. The human defenders there had fought with desperate courage, but in the end, they had been overwhelmed by superior Valan tactics and technology. She had respected their bravery even as she crushed their resistance. But this was different. Jake wasn't fighting a battle he could win through strength or skill. He was fighting death itself, using nothing but determination and improvisation. And somehow, impossibly, he was winning. "Human medical techniques," she murmured to herself. "Testing. The idea." Perhaps there was more to these people than she had realized. Perhaps their apparent weakness masked a different kind of strength. The kind that refused to accept defeat, even when faced with impossible odds. As she drifted off to sleep, Kira found herself curious about what other surprises these strange, stubborn humans might reveal. By the end of the first week, Kira was able to sit up unassisted, though Jake still fussed over her like a nervous parent. She found his concern both irritating and oddly touching. Her own people would have expected her to be back in fighting condition by now, injury or no injury. "Tell me about your family," she said one morning, as Jake checked her healing wounds. The question surprised them both. Jake's hands stilled for a moment. "What makes you think I have family?" "The way you care for others. Among my people, such tenderness is reserved for bloodkin." She watched his face carefully. "But you show it to strangers, even to enemies." "You're not my enemy," Jake said quietly. "At least I hope not." That is not an answer. Jake was silent for a long moment, his attention focused on her bandages. Finally he spoke. "Had a family, wife and daughter. They died 7 years ago." "In battle?" "Raiders." The word came out flat, emotionless. "Pirates, really. They hit 3 colonies in this sector looking for medical supplies and rare metals. Haven was the last stop on their route." Kira felt something cold settle in her chest. "You were not here." "Medical. Conference on Kepler Station. Supposed to be gone for 2 weeks. Jake's voice remained steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Emergency beacon brought me back early. Found half the colony burned, the other half picking up the pieces." "And your family?" "Medical center was one of their first targets. Emma, my wife. She was the colony's chief administrator. She tried to organize the evacuation." Jake finished with her bandages and moved to check her IV. Lily was only 8. She was in the medical center's daycare when they hit. The silence stretched between them. Kira had seen enough death to recognize the particular weight of personal loss, but she had never understood how humans processed such trauma. Among her people, deaths in battle were honored, celebrated even. But this was different. This was waste, pure and simple. "You stayed," she said finally. "Where else would I go?" Jake managed a weak smile. "Colony needed a medic. And maybe I needed to be here too. To honor their memory. To keep saving people, I guess. Emma always said I had a talent for fixing broken things." He gestured toward Kira's healing wounds. Seemed like a shame to waste it. Over the following days, Kira began to understand the driving force behind Jake's relentless care. He wasn't just treating her injuries, he was fighting a war against loss itself, using medicine as his weapon and stubborn compassion as his shield. Every life he saved was a small victory against the forces that had taken his family. It was a very human kind of warfare, she realized. No glory, no honor in the traditional sense, just an endless series of small battles fought with improvised weapons and sheer determination. But the results spoke for themselves. She was alive when she should have been dead, healing when she should have been dust. "Your people," Jake said one afternoon as they sat on the medical center's small balcony, watching the colony's daily life unfold below them. "Do they have families?" "Clans," Kira replied. "Blood bonds, but also bonds of choice and honor. My Storm siblings and I trained together from childhood, fought together, would have died together if necessary. Would have." Kira's expression darkened. "By surviving, I have broken those bonds. A warrior lives with her clan or dies with her clan. There is no middle ground." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Sounds lonely." Lonely? The concept seemed foreign to her. There is honor in such bonds, strength, purpose. But what happens when the bonds break? When the clan is gone? It was Kira's turn to fall silent. She had never considered the question. Among her people, such situations simply didn't arise. A warrior died before allowing such shame to touch their name. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "Then maybe that's something we can figure out together," Jake said gently. "Humans are pretty good at making new kinds of families when the old ones are gone." That evening, Kira watched Jake interact with the colonists who came to the medical center. They treated him with obvious affection and respect, but more than that, they relied on him, not just for medical care, but for comfort, for hope, for the steady assurance that someone would always be there when needed. It wasn't the fierce loyalty of a warrior clan, but it was its own kind of bond. More flexible, perhaps, but no less real. Jake had lost his original family, but he had built something new from the pieces, something that included not just the colonists, but apparently her as well. For the first time since the crash, Kira began to wonder what it might be like to belong to something again, not as a warrior bound by honor and blood, but as herself, damaged, uncertain, but somehow still whole. It was a distinctly human thought, and that realization both thrilled and terrified her. The Valen ships appeared without warning on a clear morning, their distinctive crescent shapes cutting through Haven's sky like silver blades. Kira saw them first from the medical center's window, and her blood ran cold. "Jake," she called, her voice tight with urgency, "you need to evacuate the colony now." Jake rushed to the window, following her gaze to the 3 warships settling into hover positions above the settlement. "Friends of yours?" "Storm Clan patrol. They are here for me." Kira struggled to stand, her healing wounds protesting the sudden movement. "If they find me alive, they will demand explanations. And if they are not satisfied," she didn't need to finish. Jake had heard enough stories about Valen justice to understand the implications. He helped her back to bed, his mind already racing through options. "Can we hide you? From my own clan? Impossible. They have my ship's beacon signature, my genetic markers. They will find me within hours." Kira looked up at him with those silver eyes. "But they do not need to find you protecting me." Like hell. Jake moved to the medical center's communication console. "I'm not running from anyone, especially not when I have a patient to look after." The first transport landed in the colony's central square with predatory grace. Jake watched through the window as 6 Valan warriors emerged, their combat armor gleaming in the afternoon sun. Even from a distance, their deadly efficiency was obvious. They moved like a single organism, every step coordinated, every gesture purposeful. The leader was massive, even by Valan standards, her armor marked with the rank insignia of a clan commander. She surveyed the small human settlement with obvious disdain, before striding toward the medical center, with her escort in formation behind her. "Commander Vera," Kira whispered, her face pale. "My former squad leader. She trained me, shaped me, into the warrior I became." She met Jake's eyes. She will not understand what you have done here. The medical center's doors burst open without ceremony. Commander Vera filled the doorway, her presence seeming to suck all the warmth from the room. She was older than Kira, her skin marked with the intricate scars that denoted high rank among the Storm Clan. Her silver eyes swept the room, taking in the human medical equipment, Jake's defensive posture, and finally settling on Kira herself. Warrior Kira. Vera's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. You live. I live, Kira confirmed, struggling to sit straighter in her bed. Explain. Jake stepped forward before Kira could respond. She was dying when I found her. I provided medical treatment. That's all there is to explain. Vera's gaze shifted to him, and Jake felt the full weight of a predator's attention. Human, you are the one responsible for this intervention. I'm the one who saved her life, if that's what you mean. Saved. Vera spoke the word like it tasted bitter. Kira of the Storm Clan was aboard a vessel engaged in honorable combat. She should have died with her ship, died with her crew. Instead, she lives in the care of soft-skinned farmers. She lives, Jake repeated firmly. Everything else is just details. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Vera's warriors shifted slightly, hands moving closer to their weapons. But Jake stood his ground, meeting the commander's, stare without flinching. You speak boldly for one so weak, Vera said. Do you understand what you have done? By preserving this warrior's life, you have robbed her of honor, of dignity, of her place among the stars. I've given her a chance to make her own choices about honor and dignity, Jake replied. Something your culture apparently doesn't allow. Kira tried to intervene. Commander, please. He meant no disrespect. Humans do not understand. Silence. Vera's command cut through Kira's words like a blade. You will explain your survival, warrior. Every detail, every choice that led to this shame. For the next hour, Kira recounted her story. The battle, the crash, her acceptance of honorable death, and Jake's stubborn intervention. She spoke in clipped military tones, but Jake could hear the underlying tension in her voice. She was walking a tightrope, trying to satisfy her commander's demands while protecting him from the worst of Valan judgment. When she finished, Vera was silent for a long moment. The human used primitive medical techniques to counteract a clan toxin. Yes, Commander. Impossible. Our weapons are designed specifically to kill warriors who have fallen in battle. There is no known antidote. Jake cleared his throat. Maybe your weapons aren't as perfect as you think. Vera's attention snapped, back to him. You claim to have accomplished what our greatest medical scientists could not? I claim to have kept a patient alive using whatever tools I had available. The rest is just chemistry. Chemistry. Vera repeated the word thoughtfully. Show me. Jake hesitated. Revealing his treatment methods might give the Valan military valuable intelligence about human medical capabilities. But Kira's life hung in the balance, and he could see the calculation in Vera's eyes. The toxin works by disrupting cellular cohesion, he explained, moving to his workstation. But it has a weakness. It requires a specific pH balance to remain stable. I introduced compounds that shifted her blood chemistry just enough to neutralize the weapon while giving her immune system a chance to fight back. Vera examined the data on Jake's screens, her expression unreadable. Crude, barbaric, but effective. She turned back to Kira. This human has demonstrated capability beyond what we believed their species possessed. This changes the nature of your situation. How so, Commander? If you were saved by incompetent primitives, your survival would indeed be shameful. But if you were saved by a capable healer— Vera paused, considering. That is a different matter entirely. Jake felt a spark of hope, but Vera's next words dashed it quickly. However, the question remains, are humans truly capable, or was this merely luck? There is only one way to determine the truth. She turned to Jake, her silver eyes glinting with dangerous intent. Human healer, you will prove your worth through combat. If you possess true capability, you will survive. If not— She shrugged. Eloquently, Jake's mouth went dry. Combat with who? Vera smiled, revealing teeth filed to predatory points. With me. The challenge arena formed a rough circle in Haven's central square, marked by the Valen warriors' weapons stuck point first into the hard-packed earth. The colonists gathered at a respectful distance, their faces tight with worry and confusion. Jake stood in the center of the ring, feeling very small and very human under the alien sky. "This is insane," he muttered, checking his medical kit one more time. It was the only equipment Vera had allowed him to bring, a concession to his role as a healer, she claimed, though Jake suspected it was more about proving a point. Commander Vera entered the circle from the opposite side, her combat armor gleaming. In the afternoon sun, she had removed her helmet, revealing the intricate scarification that covered half her face, marks of rank and honor that told the story of countless battles. Her silver eyes held the cold patience of a predator. "Human Jake Morrison," she announced in a voice that carried across the square. "You claim to possess capability beyond your species' norm. You claim to have achieved what our greatest healers could not. These claims require proof." Jake glanced toward the medical center where Kira watched from a window, her face pale with concern. "I never claimed anything. I just did my job." "Your job?" Vera began to circle him slowly, like a hunter stalking prey. "Tell me, healer, what is your job?" "To save lives. Even lives that do not wish to be saved." Jake thought about Kira's initial protests, her acceptance of what she called honorable death. "Especially those." "Why?" The question caught him off guard. "Because that's what humans do. We don't give up on each other, even when it seems hopeless." Vera nodded slowly. "An interesting philosophy, but philosophy alone will not save you here." She gestured to her warriors. "Among the Storm Clan, worth is proven through action. You saved one of our warriors using methods our science cannot explain. This suggests either great capability or impossible luck. Does it matter which? To Kira's honor, yes. If you are merely lucky, then her survival is shameful, the product of random chance rather than earned rescue. But if you possess true skill," Vera paused in her circling, "then perhaps her debt to you has meaning." Jake felt the weight of Kira's future pressing down on him. He was a medic, not a warrior. His hands were trained to heal, not to harm. But looking at the faces around the circle, colonists who depended on him, Kira who trusted him, he knew he couldn't back down. "What are the rules?" he asked. Vera smiled, showing those filed teeth. "Simple. We fight until one yields or falls. No weapons except what you carry, no assistance from your people. Victory proves your worth. Defeat," she shrugged, "proves I'm human, proves you are weak, and weakness cannot justify shame." The commander moved with liquid grace, covering the distance between them in heartbeats. Jake barely had time to dodge, feeling the wind from her strike ruffle his hair. He stumbled backward, his medical training screaming warnings about the damage those clawed hands could inflict. But as Vera pressed her attack, Jake began to notice patterns. She was testing him, probing for weaknesses, not yet committed to ending the fight quickly. This wasn't just about proving his worth, it was about understanding what kind of creature he was. Jake ducked another swipe and rolled sideways, coming up with his medical scanner in hand. Vera paused, curious about the device. "What is that?" "Human? Diagnostic tool?" Jake activated the scanner, sweeping it across her form. Data flowed across the small screen. Muscle tension, heart rate, respiratory patterns. "I told you I'm a healer. I study how bodies work." "And what does your study tell you?" Jake smiled grimly. "That you're holding back. Your heart rate is barely elevated. Your breathing is steady. You're not even trying yet." Vera's expression shifted to something resembling respect. "Observant, but observation alone will not save you." She lunged again, faster this time, but Jake was ready. He'd been watching her movement patterns, noting the slight weight shift before each attack, the way her breathing changed when she prepared to strike. Instead of trying to match her speed, he focused on being where she wasn't going to be. The dance continued for several minutes, Jake dodging and weaving, while Vera gradually increased the pace of her attacks. The colonists watched in tense silence, while the Valen warriors observed with professional interest. Finally, Vera landed a glancing blow across Jake's ribs, sending him tumbling across the hard ground. He rolled to his feet, tasting blood, his medical kit scattered around him. "Enough," Vera announced. "You fight with intelligence, human, but you lack the strength to match a true warrior." "The demonstration is complete." Jake wiped blood from his split lip. "Actually, Commander, I think you're missing the point." "Explain." Jake gestured to his scattered medical supplies. "You wanted to know if I have capability beyond the human norm, but you're measuring me by Valen standards. Strength, speed, combat prowess. That's not what makes humans special." He began gathering his medical kit, moving slowly and deliberately. "What makes us special is that we don't know when to quit. We find solutions where none should exist. We improvise, adapt, and refuse to accept defeat even when it's inevitable." Vera watched him with growing interest. "And how does that serve you here?" Jake smiled, holding up a small device from his medical kit. "Because while you were testing my combat abilities, I was scanning your physiology, and I noticed something interesting about Valen biochemistry." He activated the device, a modified neural stimulator he jury-rigged from spare parts. "Your nervous system operates on very specific bioelectric frequencies. Disrupt those frequencies." The stimulator pulsed, sending a targeted electromagnetic burst toward Vera. The commander staggered, her silver eyes widening in surprise as her muscles seized momentarily. "Impossible," she breathed. "Improvised," Jake corrected. "That's the difference." Vera recovered quickly, but she made no move to continue the fight. Instead, she studied Jake with new eyes, no longer seeing a weak human, but a different kind of warrior entirely. "You would make a dangerous enemy, Jake Morrison." "Lucky for both of us, I prefer making allies." The commander nodded slowly. "Perhaps. There is wisdom in that preference." She turned to address her warriors. "This human has demonstrated capability. His methods are unorthodox but effective. Warrior Kira's survival need not bring shame to the Storm clan." Relief flooded through Jake, but Vera wasn't finished. "However, the question of her future remains. She has been touched by human influence, changed by their methods. She can no longer serve as she once did." "Then let her choose her own service," Jake suggested. "Maybe it's time for your people to learn that there's more than one way to honor the Storm clan." The morning after the challenge brought an uneasy peace to Haven Colony. Vera's warriors maintained their positions around the settlement, neither threatening nor welcoming, while their commander engaged in what she called extended observation of human customs. Jake suspected she was buying time, trying to understand exactly what had happened to Kira and what it meant for the future. He found Kira on the medical center's balcony, staring out at the alien ships that dominated Haven's skyline. Her healing wounds had left her mobile but weak, and she moved with the careful precision of someone still learning to trust their body again. "Regrets?" Jake asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Many," Kira replied, "but not about living." "That's progress." She turned to study his face, noting the bruises from his encounter with Vera. "You risked everything for me yesterday. Why?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "Because you're worth risking everything for. And because someone had to show your commander that humans aren't as weak as she thinks." Vera is not easily impressed. The fact that she has not simply taken me back to the fleet suggests she is reconsidering many things. Good. Maybe it's time for all of us to reconsider a few things. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Vera herself, moving with that predatory grace that seemed to be hardwired into her species. She studied them both for a moment before speaking. "I have been observing your colony," she announced. "Your methods of governance, your social structures, your approach to survival on the frontier." Jake waited, knowing better than to interrupt. "You are weaker than us individually," Vera continued. "Slower, more fragile, with none of the natural weapons my people possess. Yet you thrive in environments that would challenge even seasoned warriors." "We work together," Jake said simply. "We make up for individual weaknesses through collective strength." "Yes, I have seen this. Your medical center serves not just physical healing, but emotional support. Your farmers share resources during poor harvests. Your engineers collaborate on projects that require multiple specializations." Vera paused. "It is efficient. It's human." "Indeed." Vera turned her attention to Kira. "Which brings us to the question of your future, warrior." You have been changed by prolonged exposure to human methods. You can no longer serve the Storm Clan as you once did. Kira straightened in her chair. I understand, Commander. I am prepared to accept whatever judgment— You misunderstand, Vera interrupted. I am not here to pass judgment. I am here to offer you a choice. Both Jake and Kira stared at the commander in surprise. Return with us, Vera continued, and you will be reassigned to support roles within the clan. You will live, you will serve, but you will never again be trusted with the responsibilities of a frontline warrior. Or, Kira asked quietly, or remain here, serve as a bridge between our peoples. Help us understand these humans who can accomplish impossible things with primitive tools and stubborn determination. Jake felt his breath catch. The offer was unprecedented. Valen warriors didn't abandon their clans, they served until death, bound by honor and blood. For Vera to suggest otherwise meant she had seen something in human society that challenged her fundamental assumptions. Why? Kira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would the Storm Clan consider such an arrangement? Vera's expression grew thoughtful. Because yesterday, a human healer proved that capability takes many forms. Because your survival has shown us that there are alternatives to the binary choice between honor and shame. And because— She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. Because the galaxy is changing, and perhaps it is time for the Storm Clan to change with it. She gestured toward the colony spreading out below them. These humans have built something remarkable here, not through conquest or domination, but through cooperation and adaptation. They turn weakness into strength, failure into opportunity. These are skills the Valen Empire would benefit from understanding. Jake found his voice. You're talking about an alliance. I am talking about learning, Vera corrected. Your species has capabilities we did not recognize. Our species has capabilities you could benefit from. An exchange of knowledge overseen by one who understands both peoples. Kira was silent for a long moment, her silver eyes distant. And if I choose to stay? What becomes of my clan bonds? They evolve, Vera said simply, as all living things must evolve or die. You would carry the Storm Clan's honor into a new kind of service, not as a warrior bound by ancient tradition, but as a pioneer forging new paths for our people. The weight of the decision settled over them like a heavy blanket. Jake wanted to speak, to influence Kira's choice, but he knew this was something she had to decide for herself. He had given her the chance to live. Now, she had to choose what kind of life she wanted. I need time to consider, Kira said finally. Vera nodded. You have until tomorrow's dawn, but understand, this offer will not be made again. Choose carefully, warrior. After the commander left, Jake and Kira sat in silence, watching the colony's daily life unfold below them. Children played in the square, their laughter carrying on the afternoon breeze. Adults went about their work with the quiet efficiency of people who had built something worth preserving. What would you choose? Kira asked suddenly. Jake considered the question carefully. I'd choose the path that lets me do the most good, the path that honors what I've learned and the people who taught me. Even if it meant leaving everything familiar behind. I already did that once, Jake said quietly. When Emma and Lily died, I could have left Haven, started over somewhere else. But I realized that running away wouldn't honor their memory. Staying, helping people, building something better, that's how I honor them. Kira nodded slowly. Your family lives on in the lives you save. In a way, yes, and maybe that's its own kind of immortality. That evening, as the twin suns set behind Haven's mountains, Jake found himself thinking about the strange path that had brought them to this moment. A crashed warrior, a stubborn medic, and a choice that could reshape the relationship between two species. It was exactly the kind of impossible situation that humans seem to specialize in. He had no idea what Kira would choose, but he realized that the choice itself was what mattered. For the first time in her life, she was free to determine her own path, to define her own version of honor. And that freedom, Jake thought, was perhaps the most human gift of all. Dawn came too quickly, painting Haven's sky in shades of gold and crimson that reminded Jake of the morning he'd first found Kira's crashed ship. The Valan warriors had assembled in the central square, their formation precise and intimidating despite the peaceful setting. Commander Vera stood at their center, her silver eyes fixed on the medical center where Jake and Kira emerged together. Kira moved with renewed strength, her healing almost complete. She had spent the night in meditation, wrestling with a decision that would define not just her future, but potentially the future of human-Valan relations. Now, as she walked toward the assembled warriors, her choice was written in the determined set of her shoulders. "Commander Vera," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the square, "I have made my decision. Speak, warrior." Kira straightened to her full height, every inch the StormClan warrior despite her time among humans. "I choose to remain on Haven Colony. I choose to serve as a bridge between our peoples, to help both species understand what we can learn from each other." A murmur ran through the assembled Valan warriors, but Vera silenced them with a gesture. "You understand what this means. You will no longer be Kira of the StormClan, bound by our traditions and protected by our strength." "No," Kira said firmly. "I will be Kira of Haven Colony, bound by new traditions and protected by different strength. The strength that comes from choosing to build rather than conquer, to heal rather than harm." Jake felt a surge of pride and something deeper. Hope. Not just for Kira, but for what her choice represented. Two species, different in every way that mattered, finding common ground in the most unlikely place. Vera nodded slowly. "Then let it be recorded that warrior Kira has chosen a new path of service. She carries with her the blessing of the StormClan and the hope of her people." She turned to Jake. "Human healer, you have proven yourself worthy of respect. Will you accept responsibility for her well-being and guidance?" "I accept," Jake said without hesitation, "but not as her keeper, as her friend and partner in whatever comes next." "Partnership." Vera tested the word, her expression thoughtful. "Another human concept that we may need to understand better." Over the following hours, the formal ceremonies of separation and new alliance took place. Kira renounced her warrior bonds in the traditional manner, but instead of shame there was dignity in her words. She spoke of new kinds of honor, new ways to serve her people's interests. The Valan warriors prepared to depart, but not before. Vera made one final announcement that surprised everyone present. "The StormClan will establish a permanent embassy on Haven Colony," she declared. "We will send scholars, engineers, and healers to study human methods and share our own knowledge in return. This world will become a place where our peoples can learn from each other." Jake stared at the commander in amazement. "You're talking about a cultural exchange program." "I am talking about survival," Vera corrected. "The galaxy is vast, and threats exist that neither of our species can face alone. But together, with human ingenuity and Valan strength, perhaps we can build something better than either could achieve separately." As the Valan ships departed, their silver forms disappearing into the blue sky, Jake and Kira stood together watching them go. The colony around them buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. Their quiet frontier world had just become the center of an unprecedented interspecies alliance. "Any regrets?" Jake asked, echoing their conversation from days before. "None," Kira replied. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I belong, even if it means giving up everything you used to be." Kira smiled, an expression that transformed her entire face. "I'm not giving up anything. I'm adding to what I was. The warrior is still here, but now she serves a different kind of battle, one fought with understanding instead of weapons." Over the following weeks, as news of the alliance spread through both human and Valan space, Jake watched Kira adapt to her new role with the same determination she had once brought to combat. She worked with the colonists to prepare for the cultural exchange, sharing her knowledge of Valan customs while learning the intricacies of human cooperation. But it was in the small moments that Jake saw the real change. Kira helping in the medical center, her warrior's precision now applied to healing rather than harming. Kira working with the colony's children, teaching them basic self-defense while learning human games. Kira standing watch during the night shifts, her vigilance now protecting rather than hunting. She had not become less of a warrior. She had become something more. And in doing so she had shown both species that strength came in many forms, that honor could be redefined, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to build bridges across the vast darkness between the stars. "How you know?" Jake said one evening as they watched the sunset from the medical center's balcony. "I think you're going to change the galaxy." Kira laughed, a sound that still surprised them both with its warmth. "We're going to change the galaxy, humans and Veylan working together, building something neither could achieve alone." "Together," Jake agreed. And in that word lay the promise of a future where species boundaries mattered less than shared purpose, where the measure of worth was not in conquest, but in cooperation, and where the greatest battles were fought not with weapons, but with hope. The first Valen embassy ship arrived 3 months later, carrying scholars and scientists eager to study human methods. The first human delegation departed for Valen space 6 months after that, carrying doctors and engineers ready to share their innovations. And at the center of it all stood Kira, no longer a warrior bound by ancient traditions, but a pioneer, forging new paths through the stars. Jake Morrison had saved one alien's life on a routine morning, using nothing but stubborn determination and improvised medicine. In return, she had given him something he hadn't realized he'd lost, a sense of purpose that stretched beyond the boundaries of any single world, any single species. Together, they had proven that the greatest human trait wasn't strength or intelligence or technology. It was the simple, stubborn refusal to give up on anyone, even former enemies, even when hope seemed impossible, even when the smart thing would be to walk away. They were building something new among the stars, one life at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage at a time. And if that wasn't the most human thing of all, Jake thought with a smile, then he didn't know what was. The galaxy was, vast and full of wonders, but it had never seen anything quite like what humans could accomplish when they refused to accept that something was impossible. And now, with allies who understood that same stubborn hope, they were just getting started.